Hello, hello, my loyal Cosimaniacs. This is a holiday. This is a real holiday. Today, April 7th, at 10:30 in the morning, will be the 40th anniversary of my first radionic box and helmet. "40 years is a long time. Memories fade. But some remain. And this I will not forget." Oh, this shirt looks funny. Yeah. I need new clothes. Forgive me. I'm fighting a little cold, so I may cough occasionally. But I don't want to press the stop button. I don't want anything to interfere with my train of thought. I get derailed enough as it is. I had known about radionics since I was 16 or 17. I don't remember exactly what age as far as that goes. But I had gotten a little book. They made these little paperbacks in those days. They had 4 picture panels on the front. And they had a bunch of things inside of them. Usually occult stuff, psychic stuff, Fortean, UFOs, Brad Steiger. Oh, I love Brad Steiger's work. He was a fixture in my youth, reading his stuff. But there was a little one called Powers That Be, a paperback, and it talked about radionics. I was fascinated, but there were a couple of problems. First, the equipment as described in the book seemed almost impossible with my limited skills to build. And second, it was all about healing. I was 17 years old. I couldn't have cared less about healing. So the book got put away. Radionics got put away. And I stuck to more normal, quote unquote, scare quotes, occult things. I encountered radionics in books occasionally, articles occasionally, but nothing I could use. It was just an interesting weirdness. I like gadgets, I like fiddling with dials and that sort of thing, but what could I do with this? How would I get one of these things? In those days, what commercial machines there were prohibitively expensive, almost impossible to come by. Ultimately, a company named Lord, Lord', would come along, and their stuff was still prohibitively expensive, and frankly, the one instrument of theirs that I actually saw was atrociously built. But again, it was like, what are these things? What would I possibly actually do with them? I'm not interested in healing, and I certainly couldn't care less about identifying minerals. You could see me out in the mountains with a pickaxe. I have a rock. Let's see what's in this rock. Wow, don't be ridiculous. So radionics stayed on the back burner until April of 1977. And then, well, I subscribed at that time to a short-lived but interesting journal put out by Llewellyn called Gnosticus. Not to be confused with Gnostica, a much more popular journal that came along about the same time. And there was an article entitled Electronic Talismans. And it was about radionics and talismanic magic. Well, I was working in talismanic magic at the time. That was my forte. That was my primary area of interest. And this book, what am I saying? This article basically was about radionics used in that role. And not only that, it had a schematic of a device that actually I thought I could figure out how to build. Now this is kind of interesting because at the time I had no concept of electronic notation, what these squiggles and lines and everything meant. So I was just kind of going by guesswork, by what the description was. And so I decided I'm going to build one of these things, only I'm going to make a few changes. Well, the first thing I did was I actually decided, well, I need to know if I can work this thing. Can I make a stick pad work? So I got a plastic coffee can lid out of Mother's collection of coffee can lids, and I did the thing with the thumb, and asking a question that I knew the answer was yes. Am I the smartest man in the world? No, I don't think that was the question. I don't remember what the question was, but anyway, I knew the answer was yes, and thumb stopped. Interesting. I tried it a few more times, a few other questions, and it worked. It seemed to work well enough that this machine was worth the time and trouble to build. So I made up a parts list. I already had a small battery-operated amplifier. I had a shoebox I could put everything in. I needed as follows. I had wire and a few other things I needed. I built, before I went out, I actually built an antenna out of parts from an old erector set that I got when I was 9 years old. And so I went to an electronics store, local electronics store at that time, Olson Electronics, and that was a wonderful place. They had all kinds of gadgets and stuff. I was a regular there. I was always buying things. So I got, let me see, I got a couple of jacks, 1/4-inch jacks at the time. Couple of plugs, speaker wire. I had regular wire. A variable capacitor, otherwise known as a radio tuning dial, a potentiometer, and a knife, and a dual knife switch. Unfortunately, it was small. I would have liked to have gotten a big old-fashioned ones, but you make do with what you have. So, I went home. I arrived home about 10 o'clock that morning with my bounty on April 7th. And I sat down in my bedroom and put everything on the bed, and I proceeded to go to work, putting it together. And I finished it by about 10:30 in the morning. My first radionic box. And it kind of an interesting feature at the time, because bear in mind, I had no idea what I was doing with this. I was just sort of thrashing around. And that was the output One position of the knife switch went to the antenna. The other position went to the output jack. I made a detector, wire and jack that I plugged in, portable detector. I thought I had invented something. Little did I know the Delaware laboratories had come up with it decades before. And I thought, this thing is kind of cool. What can I do with it? And then I said, okay, time to make the second component. And the second component was a helmet. Well, it wasn't the cyanic amplifying helmet that we all know and love. It was basically a glorified head electrode. Because I had this thing about helmets. At that time, I was making helmets. You could go to Kmart and get a plastic helmet shell that fit my head for $1. And so I was making these things right and left. The house was full of helmets. And so I had one that I didn't like the design. So I figured, okay, I'll use this one because I'm not going to use it for anything else. And so I dribbled the hole for the plug. Actually, this was a quarter-inch, but not a quarter-inch plug, but mini plug. I actually had the cable that could work with both, both ends. And I wired that to a couple of foil pads. Actually originally a foil pad in the center of the head. Third eye. And my first experiments did that. Well, there were problems with that. And so that was changed. But that was the first head electrode, the first helmet. And so what I did after that, about 11:15 in the morning, I plugged the helmet into the input jack of the machine. This little box in a shoebox with a coffee can on one end and the antenna on the other. Plugged in my detector pad. I said, what can I do with this? What can this do? I had no enemies at the time to target. What could I do with this? I wonder if I could project into the center of the universe. Never let it be said that I thought small. So I put on the helmet, and I thought, I just sort of visualized the center of the universe, and turned the dials while working. Let's see if this right now. Turn the dials while working the stick pad. There were 3 dials. The first was the variable capacitor. The second was the rotary potentiometer. The third was the potentiometer on the amplifier, the little battery-operated amplifier. And I turned a knife switch back to the antenna, and I turned on the amplifier. And I was God. I really don't know how to describe it. It was the most amazing experience of my life. Oh, wow. What am I looking at? What am I seeing? What can I do? Well, that was a bit much. So I took off the helmet, turned everything off. That was interesting. That was entertaining. And then it was lunchtime. Then it was lunchtime. And science is fun. Magic is fun. Lunch is more fun. So I stopped to make lunch. And I woofed down my lunch. And then I was back at it. Oh, I was back at it. I was doing all sorts of projection stuff, looking into windows, looking into houses, looking into the White House. All manner of things. It was a busy afternoon. I don't think I even took my nap. By the end of that day, I had something. It was 40 years ago. It's a long time. Generation born, become adult. I'm an old man. But old men remember. And that is a day that I will always remember. I went to bed that night knowing I had started something. I had no idea what. I'm just little old Uncle Chucky. And 40 years ago, I changed the world. Happy Machine Day, folks. I hope you enjoy this stuff as much as I do. Because the pleasure never ends. This is your old friend, the Archfiend, the agent of the Antichrist who wants top billing, the inheritor of Araman, and whatever else they're calling me this week. Have an evil day.